that was really interesting because, to be honest with you, with Fakespot, I was not doing it just to make money. I was doing it to build a product that would be used by many people to bring some kind of benefit to their everyday life. And that's how I approached it.
That was the voice of Saoud Khalifah, co-founder of Fakespot and director at Mozilla. I am your host, Ali Zwail, and this is the Startups Arabia podcast, where you learn about the Arab startups ecosystem from the best founders, investors, and operators in the region. My guest today is Saoud Khalifah, co-founder of Fakespot and director at Mozilla Foundation. Saoud was born in Kuwait during the Gulf War and left for the US at the age of 18. He launched Fakespot.com in 2016, a platform that detects fake reviews using AI after being scammed by a supplement with fake ratings. Since then, Fakespot is now used by millions of shoppers worldwide when browsing popular e-commerce websites. Fakespot was acquired by Mozilla in 2023 and is now integrated into Mozilla Firefox, one of the world's most utilized browsers. Prior to working at Fakespot, Saoud was a software engineer at Goldman Sachs and graduated from Monmouth University with his bachelor's and master's in software engineering. Enjoy this meandering, wide-ranging discussion with Saoud on his career and also philosophical and other types of discussions around AI. Welcome to the Startups Arabia podcast. My guest today is Saoud Khalifah, founder of Fakespot and currently director at Mozilla, which acquired Fakespot. Aziz, who introduced us, has told me that he is the best technical person he's ever met in his life. So I'm looking forward to picking his brains on some things in that area. But he also has a very interesting founding story that I know you guys are going to like to listen to. Welcome, Saoud.
Thank you for having me, Ali. And thank you for the kind words from you and from Elise.
No worries. So, okay. I was wondering where to start. And as usual, I do some research on the LinkedIn profile to figure things out. And I had this wait what moment while reading your profile, which is, oh, okay, he worked as a security engineer from 2008 to 2015. That's fine, okay. And then I see your academic record, and then I realize you started university, or you started studying software engineering officially 2011. So you must have been in school or something when you started as a security engineer. Can you tell me more about that, especially that I know that iFuzzer was, I mean, you guys, you found bugs in things like Microsoft and Adobe and other softwares. It was so tell me more about that. What happened there?
Yeah, that's really interesting. You saw that overlap. Well, I've been coding for a very long time. I've been in computers a very long time. Actually, started in Kuwait when I was age 11, and it started with basically a Dragon Ball Z game for me and my brother. It was a card game in Visual Basic 6.0. And if you remember, in the 90s and 2000s, this was like the biggest thing for boys, especially in our region and other regions. But then, a couple of years later, as I was becoming a teenager, I got really focused on security, hacking and breaking software, reverse engineering. I was really interested in assembly. So I was looking at the little machine code, and a lot of people, like my brother, when he would see me over my shoulder, he'd be like, "Dude, what are you reading? Like, what is this? It looks like an alien language." And I don't know, I just loved breaking software down to its core elements, and this was the machine code essentially. And you could find holes within that software. So some of the biggest categories are buffer overflows. They still are very prevalent. They're
Yep.
basically vulnerabilities where you can send some kind of payload, like a file or whatever, and you can hack someone's computer. This is what a lot of the secret agencies and three-letter agencies use around the world. to infiltrate their counterparts across the regions. So when I was, before going to college, so I grew up in Kuwait up to the age of 18. I spent every summer, or like most of my summers, in Europe, in Poland. My part of my family is from Poland and from Kuwait, and it was a really interesting upbringing. My grandfather in Poland was a programmer also. He gave me a lot of his books, and he actually got us a computer. I played Doom 1 on MS-DOS and stuff on his computer. So that's how like this thing like kind of snowballed for me. And this security stuff was something that was just evolving over the years. And in Kuwait, we didn't really have an industry for programmers and security and hacking and stuff like this. Now there is one. I actually get a lot of emails from Kuwaiti security. Yeah, actually a lot of known guys now that go to Black Hat and other expos that are very well known in this industry. And they reach out to me. They're like, "Hey, I heard you were here back in 2008, 2009, 2010. You found these vulnerabilities." So it's really cool to see that actually some folks from Kuwait University created a security group, and I was here at 18, and they emailed me. They're like, "Hey, would you like to join our group? Are you still in Kuwait?" And that's when I actually moved to the US at the age of 18. And as you saw, I was still doing it while going to college. It's my passion to this day. I just love finding different vulnerabilities, and it actually gave me a good amount of pocket money. I bought my first car with with one of the vulnerabilities, which was Microsoft PowerPoint vulnerability at this time. It was pretty big because it's like a PowerPoint file. I share it with you, and it can exploit this buffer overflow and take over your computer. And that's I got paid through Zero Day Initiative. It was one of the first bug bounty programs in the world. They worked with like Microsoft and everyone like this. A funny story is I actually applied to an internship with Microsoft at this time, and they rejected me. They're like, "Hey, are you like?" They're like kind of insinuating, "Are you this guy that found vulnerability here?" And this was back in the Balmer. Yeah. Well, now their attitude has changed. Honestly,
Yep,
I was
yep.
kind of surprised and shocked. But back then, with Balmer at the helm, they had a different culture. It was like, if you kind of damage our reputation, we do not want to work with you.
Right.
I thought they would want me there to help like fix things and stuff, but it was a different attitude. Yeah, so that was like my kind of my formative years. I was still coding a lot, still launching side projects. Anything I could automate in my life, I would try to program it.
So I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned also that you moved when you were 18 to the U.S. And Ilyas Trebolev, I hope I'm pronouncing his name remotely right. He a professor at Stanford who studies entrepreneurship. He was saying that there was a very high correlation between people who traveled to different countries when they were young and entrepreneurship and being a good startup founder. Do you think? Why do you think that would be, based on your experience?
It's a sign that you like to take risk. So people that don't like to take risks will remain in their environment probably their whole life and find comfort and solace in their own environment that they're very acquainted with. Folks that like to take risk will try to venture outside. And honestly, Ali, in our genetics, if you look at Arabs specifically, most of us were nomads for a very, very long
Mm,
time. That takes a lot of risk for you to move between regions in the Middle East and whatever. You don't know if this region is going to be safe or not. You're trying to find maybe new trade or something to support the family. So it's in our genes, believe it or not. And I think there's a correlation with that. I mean, I can get into this. I've researched this a little bit. America actually has a higher ratio of folks because everyone kind of immigrated to America, and
yep,
they had to leave their comfort zones back wherever they're from. This
yep.
is Europe, Middle East, Asia, and when you do those types of moves, um, it actually shows a higher inclination of brain chemicals for certain individuals. So it's a really interesting topic.
So you're kind of genetically predisposed to take more risk
I
and
would
do
say
that
so.
type of
I
thing.
mean, you could be taking risk because your family supports you and like they're like pushing you in that direction, so it kind of buffers over your comfort zone. But if you like to take risk, and if you look at all the startup founders, and this includes you, we like to take risk. We'd like to assess risk and then take gambles and bets and stuff like this. And that's where I think it comes down to the greatest people that are in this industry. They looked at a future that was their own version of a future, and they put everything into it.
Yeah. This is going to take me off script a bit, but I was just thinking about whether this is risk or uncertainty. So I would say that almost entrepreneurs, they like to mitigate risk, but but they are able to handle uncertainty. They're willing to go into uncertain areas, and but with a mindset of, where are my risks, and I'm gonna handle them as they go. So they're able to deal with that versus someone. And I guess that comes with also with traveling, where you go to the unknown and you don't know what's going to happen, but you're willing to handle that, and you'll manage the risks as you move, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's an arsenal attributes of in your character that you can build. Actually, you don't need to have like be born with it. Although some people say there are some attributes that you just have to be born with, and you just like hone them as you mature. But I will tell you my startup journey. If you looked at my career, I went to Goldman Sachs. It was a little bit too comfortable for me, believe it or not. I was the only Kuwaiti. It was like you were a cog in a big established machine that is over 100 years old. To me, it was just everything. There was a pattern to everything there. Everything, how you move up the ladder, how you talk to people, the culture. There was a pattern, and
How you
everything was
dress.
how you dress. That time, I still had to iron my suit every day, and all this stuff. So it was something that was really interesting to me, and I was the only Kuwaiti dude in Wall Street at this time in Goldman, and it was interesting for me. It was really interesting. They have a office in Riyadh. Um, we had a couple of teams that would work with between our New York City office and the Riyadh office, and I was always wondering how was it there? Was the culture a little bit different over there due to the regional differences? But that's why I wanted to leave and start my own thing, and that's how the fake spot journey started. I will tell you though, the character develops like a rocket ship when you're put into a hot seat like that, where you're in a startup. You have
Mm.
to look at so many different angles as you're building this company and you're building this culture. You're building your team. You're building the product. You're building your business. There's different tracks that you're doing, but you develop a certain amount of traits that I think are really critical for the startup life.
I mean, that's a good segue to start maybe talking about FakeSpot, which I think you started in 2016. Tell us more about FakeSpot. What it did and why you decided to found it.
Yeah, well, so FakeSpot was one of those side projects too, that I would launch to automate some part of a problem I encountered in my daily life. I was a big believer in online shopping, always. Believe it or not, in Kuwait, I used to order through a PO box in New York City. They would forward it to Kuwait for Amazon. I bought books and stuff like this back in 2007, 2008. I was still a teenager, but that's how much I believed in this future. In Kuwait, and at that time, I remember no one knew what that was. Now it's
Yeah.
obviously very different. So I did that forwarding, and I was a huge believer, and I would do the continuous shopping when I was in college in the United States. Then I started getting into the gym. I was in New Jersey at this time at Monmouth University, this private college where you mentioned the software engineering. A lot of the professors were ex AT&T Bell Labs. They joined before the breakup of the monopoly, which is interesting
Mm.
because now we're having this happen with Google and other companies. The
Potentially.
anti Yeah, potentially. Time will tell. But they got broken up, and then when they left their lab, like Bell Labs, they came and joined Monmouth University. So it was a really interesting group of professors that each one worked at different segments, like neural networks, UI, next generation user experiences. So it was a really good experience for me. I kind of lucked out, to be honest with you. I didn't know about the background of all these folks at this time, and Bell
Mm.
Labs had a huge lab right there in New Jersey, in the central part of New Jersey. Yeah. So FakeSpot started after I bought a supplement on Amazon. I was in my last year in college, and I wanted something that increased your endurance or stamina or something like this. So I
Mm.
went to Amazon, looked up, researched a little bit, saw this one supplement, hundreds of 5-star reviews. The yellow stars were glowing in my face. So I'm like, okay, I always trusted this rating. Let's buy this product. One click checkout, got the product in 2 days, and it looked like someone made it in a garage. Like the tape was falling off. The pills themselves had sawdust, like a wood
Oh,
particle in them. I didn't even dare to ingest it because I was like, "There's no way that this is going to work. Like, there's something off here. It smelled off, all this stuff." So, I went back and I looked at the ratings, and I realized that a lot of them were bots, and a lot of them were people that were like talking the best things about the company and not about the product. So to me,
mm.
they looked super suspicious, and I just realized this is like my moment where I realized I can't trust reviews anymore on the internet. So that's where I was spending a couple hours. I was researching every reviewer, every profile. I was, opening new tabs for each profile. And then I said to myself, wait a second, what I'm doing right now, I can automate with AI, like emulate some parts of my brain with a couple AI models. One that will look at language, another one that will look at the purchasing behaviors, another one that will look at the company. And that's how FakeSpot started. At this time, I like to have a name before a project starts. It's just very similar to naming your child. Actually, they have found a correlation. If you give your child a very strong name, they're more predisposed to success in life.
Interesting.
It's just it's just a psychological thing. So I want to name my project a very strong name, and that's FakeSpot was one of the first things that appeared in my head. And I actually looked it up. Of course, it's taken. This was around 2015, 2016, and I'm like, okay, let me try to buy it though. Reached out through one of the brokers, and I offered $100 or something. I looked up who owned it. It was a kid in the Midwest of the United States that had a Counter Strike clan called Fake Spot. They had like a whole page and everything, and he's like, "Yo, dude, this is awesome. I'm gonna accept it." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Let's do it." So
Thank
I paid him,
you.
thank you, and I paid him. It was $100 something dollars, and I launched the website. It was very, very simple. It was a text box, a button, paste in the product page that you're looking at, and then the models will all retrieve the reviews, information about the product, the company, and
Mm.
then it will give you a grade if you can trust the reviews or not within 30 seconds.
Mm. Nice. And how did that go from this side hustle or side project that you were working on to actually becoming a company? When did you feel there was enough traction there or potential?
So that's a really interesting question, Ali. I never thought so. When I launched FakeSpot, it was just for myself first. I wanted something to help me when I'm shopping online. And then, as I was building it, I had a lot of passion for it. I didn't really care about building a company or anything like this. My story was a little bit different then. If you look at people like Elon Musk and whatever, Elon Musk is very strategic in his growth. Like every company he did, he compounded his wealth to put it into his next company. I was more interested in building stuff that was useful to many people. That was my. I kind of now realize that that's my meaning when I'm doing this type of software. And
Mm.
I started sharing it. I posted it on like a couple of forums, Hacker News and whatever. But the one thing that was really common for me was I would work on it every day, every night till the late morning. And even when I got a job at Goldman Sachs, so when you're a Kuwaiti in the U.S., usually you go back to the region. Usually
Usually.
most of the Kuwaitis I know, or most of the Saudis, or most of the Qataris, actually all of them, all my group and Emiratis in Oregon and in New Jersey. I spent a couple years in Oregon and then in New Jersey. All of them went back,
Yep.
not one stayed.
It's true.
Um, Maybe because they wanted to go back to their family. They didn't want to take that risk. and they wanted to, go back to the comfort of the region. To me, I was more, I was in my 20s, and I'm like, hey, I have nothing to lose. Let's go all in. So I applied for a job at Goldman Sachs, and I was like, let's do it. I had a couple applications out there, but Goldman was really interesting to me. Um, and I was working there for about a year, and every night I would come back, and the commute was pretty bad. We had really rough winters at this time. Something I had to get used to, also from
Yep.
desert desert
From
to snow.
Yep, yep.
So
Maybe
yes,
your Polish blood might have helped there.
you would think so, but it didn't. I'm more, I think I'm more on the Arabian side on my genetics, even if you look at the facial hair and everything. Um, but I would come back from the commute, and the commute was very long. It was 2 hours each way from New Jersey to Wall Street. It was pretty rough. I would take the boat ferry from New Jersey to Wall Street. Actually, the best way to commute, if you do it between those two states. And I would come back, and 8:30 p.m. I would reach my apartment, and I would work on Fakespot till 3 a.m. That was my life. And, I had nothing else going on.
Obsession.
Just an obsession with this and with this. Um, and then, you asked me when was the moment when I started thinking something's going to happen. So I remember in the first year of the launch, someone posted it on Reddit, and I, I didn't know. I was not really good at DevOps at this time. I didn't really
Mm,
have a lot of experience. I was more of a C++, C assembly guy. I was like really raw with the web. I also didn't know how to scale services. I had no clue how to do it. So someone posted it on Reddit, and we received the infamous, uh, Reddit hug of death, which is basically
yeah.
a lot of people accessing the website and then taking it down at the same time. And I just did not know how to scale this. And then I started researching, and I rebuilt the whole infrastructure for it to scale better. And then, every time I did these big improvements, it started getting better. And I remember this, it had a couple thousand upvotes on Reddit. So it was really, really,
Wow.
um, it was on the front page of reddit.com, I remember. So, like, you're asking me, when did I feel like something bigger is at play here? That's actually when I started feeling it. And then a journalist reached out to me from Money Magazine, and she was like, "Hey, I'm starting to see fake reviews are becoming a big problem right now on Amazon and other places. Can I have an interview with you? It seems like you're the only expert here." Because FakeSpot was actually the first type of website where you paste something in, it analyzes it and spits out a grade with AI. There was nothing like that before. I didn't even look around to see if there was anything like that. Honestly, I didn't care. I just wanted to build something for myself. And I had that interview. I had to take a lunch break at on Wall Street. Went across to a cafe and did the interview. 1 month later, the magazine comes out, and I go to the mall and I buy it. And they talk about FakeSpot, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be bigger than I think it's going to be.
Yep,
I have to
yep.
start the next chapter now, and that's when I actually started realizing that there's something huge at play. And also, very interestingly, Ali, there was an enlightenment moment in the population here when Trump got elected in that year. He started talking about fake news, and
Yep.
people started realizing, wait, fake news. What about fake reviews? What about fake tweets? What about
Everything.
fake
Yeah.
everything? It started, you started questioning the internet. Up to that point, the internet was always a good source of
Mm,
information. But then you start realizing, hey, wait, what happened on that Wikipedia page? Someone put in a prank or like something. Like I remember I was reading something about Mohamed Salah. Liverpool is my team, and someone from another team put a like an ugly note in his bio, and I was like, you can't even trust Wikipedia now.
yeah.
So FakeSpot was, I think, also at the right trend in a population
Zeitgeist.
zeitgeist. And like if you're an armchair sociologist or a psychologist and you look at population trends, actually this is really, really important for startups.
Exactly.
You need to look at the trends in the long road. And Elon Musk is a master at this. How?
Yep.
Look at electric cars. Look at spaceships, rockets, and look at his neural implants. He's a little bit late with the AI stuff. I would say he did invest in
Well,
OpenAI.
I mean, he founded OpenAI. I mean, he was one of the founders, so you can't really
Yeah,
blame him.
he was kind of ousted, which was interesting. But he did the opposite at Tesla. He invested and
Yes,
took it over,
exactly.
and on the top. But he sees those trends 10 years ahead, and Steve Jobs was really good at that.
Yeah,
These founders, they're really good at looking at these trends, these psychological trends, these like what's going to happen in society. I actually lucked out, I think, with FakeSpot because I was like, okay, I'm hitting on something here, especially in e-commerce. E-commerce is also a very rapidly growing market. This is when it started taking off, like
yep,
exponentially, all around the world, not just in America, all around the world. And the most important part of online commerce is reviews.
yep.
Why? Because you can't test the product, you can't look at it in physical form. You have to rely on the opinions of other folks, and if they are fake, that kind of breaks the model.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, when Amazon brought on reviews, it was a huge innovation, wasn't it? It made a huge difference to people's willingness to buy online. And I think Jeff Bezos, your arch enemy, got angry calls from publishers when he first introduced reviews because, why are you letting just the average people on the street give bad reviews for my books and stuff like that, where we won't put our stuff on your website, etc. But he was like, this is going to increase trust and it's going to increase your sales as a publisher. And I think he was right. But then the fake reviews came to the scene, right? Which is where
Yeah,
you come in. So yeah, I mean, I think I would underline this importance of like a startup riding a trend, and the best startups are riding the intersection of two trends: the technological trend, like AI, for example, and a social or cultural trend, where that combination is incredibly powerful. Like EVs being ready for prime time at the same time that environmental awareness was also there, and political situation was also there to help push that, in the example of Tesla, I guess. So I mean, that's great. There is a lot of traction, there's a need. You made something you want and it turned out that many other people want, but where's the business model? Did you start thinking about that, or was your first thought how to get funding so you can sustain yourself while you figure out the business model?
no, I did not have the idea of funding at the beginning. More It was more, how do we increase traffic to fixspot.com and bring in more shoppers to have this as part of their journey, and then to start figuring out the monetization. FakeSpot was is a very interesting business. It's built on trust, and with trust, you can't monetize it like other companies do in certain ways. Like, let's say, something like a BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed, it's all affiliate and all trendy and catchy stuff. Sometimes those products are really bad and cheap. So FakeSpot was taking a different angle. We're looking at high quality recommendations and trustworthy recommendations from trustworthy brands. It actually took us a bit of a research and time to figure out what would be the best business model. And for us, the best business model is building a positive sum game, essentially, where we can advertise brands that don't buy fake reviews, that don't engage in dark hat tactics. Promoting those types of brands builds a positive sum game. If you look at other advertising models and different platforms, like let's say Meta or whatever, they allow everyone to come in, whether it's a scam coin or scam website. They will catch it at one point because people report it eventually, but they don't have that. They may have an initial wall where you have to put in your ID and whatever, but people know how to bypass that. With fake spot, we only allow brands that are established. We've been analyzing it for a long time, and they have good grades, reliable good grades over a long period stretch of time. Now something may happen, but that's really rare, where management changes or someone buys the company and now they're becoming deceptive. We monitor that as well. So our business model is essentially that, recommending the best products to our consumers. So we save them time and money, and research, so that you can look at the best products. So let's say you're searching for an office desk or a chair. We have in our database brands that we've been analyzing for a long time. They get A grades all the time. A grade. This is how we grade in Fakespot. We use A to F, like a school letter system.
Report card. Yeah.
Exactly, and an A grade means you have a high predisposition to trustworthy reviews on your listings, and that's basically the business model for us.
So you kind of, it's kind of like affiliate links to these, to their e-commerce websites, right?
Um,
Or
in certain in
their
certain
shops.
cases, it's more, I would say, advertising. We're advertising the honest and trustworthy companies that
Oh,
honestly,
so you're advertising, but you're filtering the advert, so you don't get accept any advertiser, basically.
we don't. Yeah, only we accept the trustworthy brands. And as we're developing this business model, the monetization behind FakeSpot, we had a couple pilot clients, and believe it or not, they were all FakeSpot power users. They were all
Hmm.
using FakeSpot, and they were using FakeSpot to look at their competitors, and they were reporting them to Amazon or other platforms. So that's how it started. Like CEOs of large companies that were making tens of millions of dollars in revenue, they were using FakeSpot every day for looking at their competitors, their own products to gauge quality. FakeSpot also gives you more information. Like we tell you what is good and bad about a product based on the reviews, and a
Hmm.
lot of these sellers find that really useful information. We've been developing like NLP technology for a long time. And FakeSpot like zero point 0.1 when I launched it out of my bedroom in college to now, it's evolved significantly. We actually use transformer-based models. One of the first companies to use transformer-based models, especially in the New York City
After the
area.
paper. Yeah.
After the paper, yes, I we used like recurrent neural networks at that time, RNNs, and more about processing sentiment and looking at the positives and negatives about a product. But then I built a model and I put in an attention layer, and I was waiting for the training, and then I looked at the results, and they increased it significantly. The accuracy, the extraction of information from a text corpus. So it was really good. By the way, the other thing I really liked about FakeSpot was, and this is embedded in I think even in Arabian culture, um, to learn as much as we can with whatever we're doing. That was my big passion.
Hmm.
Also, I wanted to learn about DevOps. I wanted to learn about AI. I wanted to learn about model building. I wanted to learn how to scale a service. That was something that I was just really interested in. It was like
Right.
at at other places like Goldman and these places, like if you want to learn how to scale, 1 year transfer to move to another team that is dealing with that. I was just not interested in that. And time is of the essence. You have no you have to utilize it efficiently.
Yeah. Nothing like startups to teach you everything across the board at the same time, right? But I want to take you back to the beginning. You said you didn't focus on fundraising, you didn't focus on business model, and you were just trying to get more and more traction. But actually, when you get more traction, you get more cost as well. So, I mean, how are you handling that, or when did you think we need to take this to the second to a next phase?
So we were actually one of the first consumer applications that released a browser extension. You may have heard of Honey and these other extensions. And when I released that Chrome extension, it was just me at this time. It was just me with a fake spot. I made it really, really seamless as part of your shopping experience. So instead of copying and pasting a link, it would show the grades inside, like Amazon or Walmart and
Nice.
whatever. Um, and then we started getting a lot more users installing the extension. And, I realized that, okay, you're right, cost is very important as part of a startup. I did build it to be very, very efficient on the DevOps side. So we actually saved a lot of money on the DevOps side. I optimized every single algorithm, I optimized every single service. So that actually delayed the fundraise by quite a good amount of time. And I like to wear many hats, so that also helped us save, like from hiring a DevOps person or some other ML person. I was actually doing our DevOps and ML up to like the fourth year of the company. I just loved doing it while doing everything else. I just loved doing it. I would sit till 5 a.m. and update our database. So
Wow.
it was. we saved a lot of money by doing this that way, but it's there are costs associated on your personal health as well, obviously.
Yeah,
Uh,
and maybe on the growth of the company as well.
yes, absolutely. So to answer your question, I realized that at one point we needed to move to that next level, and the only way to do that is with extra capital. And with that capital, we would now be able to invest in more marketing. I never did marketing for FakeSpot; like it was just me posting on forums and stuff. And with that, we could now add some jet fuel into the engine and build a flywheel effect around this niche, which is fake reviews. And that's how we started. I met my co-founder, Rob, on that ferry that I mentioned from New Jersey to New York. It was a really funny story. Like we were going on the ferry. It was winter. It was really cold. I got on the ferry like 1 minute before it started to leave. They have this huge horn that they do before they're gonna leave. And I see like in the distance, I see this guy. He's in crutches and he's like trying to run with crutches. And I tell the crew at the ferry, "Hey guys, there's someone there. Wait a second." And usually they never wait, but for this time they're like, "Yeah, this guy's on crutches. Let's wait for him." He came on. He was short of breath, and he's like, "Oh man, thank you so much. Like I had a really important meeting today." And then he asked me, "What's your name?" We exchanged that, and he asked me, "What were you working on?" I told him about FakeSpot, and then he got really interested in it. We went to inside the ferry, and we started talking for a long time. He was also working at a startup at this time that was unfortunately reaching its end,
Hmm.
and he was kind of looking at something else, his next chapter. I could tell from talking with him. He's older than me. He's about 10 years older than me. I could tell that he had all traditional values. Even from my first meeting with him, um, like kind of like the things we value in an Arabian society, like respect for elders, loyalty. Really, really hard to find people with these traditional values. It turns out he was raised traditionally by his mom. He's also part Polish, part Italian, and like he had these traditional values, and I could just tell from talking with him. Then in the ferry at the end of the meeting, he's like, "Hey, I'm going to use FakeSpot tonight. I actually bought this baby camera. He had a baby at this time,
Hmm.
and he's like, "There's something wrong with it. I don't like it." So he went that night. He told me the story. He analyzed this. It was a very known brand baby camera, and it started fraying and smoking. It would cause a
Oh,
fire alert in the
wow.
house. It got a D grade on FakeSpot. Next to a baby, yes, right in front of the baby, and it was a very well known brand. When he told me the brand, I was like, "Whoa, like that's crazy!" And they got a D grade on FakeSpot. He
Wow.
told his wife, he told his wife about this whole thing, FakeSpot, the grade, and then she kind of nudged him and said, "Maybe you should, think about maybe joining this guy. He's talking about fundraising and all this other stuff. You have experience with that." So Rob was really interesting because he's a lawyer, accountant. He's very good at marketing. He also has product sense. So he's also kind of like a Swiss knife, and he has those traditional values. So, we started talking for a couple of months on this ferry. He was still kind of closing that business down, the current job he was working, and I was trying to expand a fake spot. And then he's like, "Hey, dude, can I? Would you be open to me joining you?" And then he was the first like guy with me, co-founder. I was really into it, and that's the story of it. Was very spontaneous. I think it was 6 months of us talking on the ferry up to the point where he joined me officially. And at this time, he had to actually take a very, very small salary. I had to take a very small salary, and we went all in. And that's when we were on the journey now to do our first pre-seed round.
Interesting. And the rest is kind of history in terms of just growth from then on, right? Um,
Um, Struggles and challenges, ups and downs. The first challenge was the first fundraise. That was a big, big, big challenge. It was 7 months
wow.
to
Yeah.
get to get it closed, to get that first lead investor closed. So, we found me actually not being, like American. I didn't go to an Ivy League school and all this other stuff. It in the New York City area in the Northeast. that worked against me. I could tell you that fact. If you told someone you're from this school or whatever, they value that really highly for some reason. So it was really interesting for me to see that they didn't care about if you were smart. They didn't care if you were like wearing many hats. They didn't care if you were building something that was useful for people. They cared about that. So at the first, for me, they were filtering me, but I was also filtering them. Because if you're an investor that is looking at these things, then you're not going to be a good partner for the future. So it took us some time to find the best investors for our situation, and then we had a pitch. I would say this was in May 2018. We met with Sashi Reddy from SRI Capital. He was an immigrant from India, built a business in the 90s, sold it to Oracle, and then had a couple more successes. And then his last success, he sold it to a big public listed company. That was a good chunk of money. And then that's when he launched his VC. And, we went to this pitch. This was maybe I would say, somewhere in between 50 and 75 pitch number. And we meet him in person. We pitch him. And by the way, the pitch stories were insane. We went to Boston for one pitch. We met some mob associated investor. It was just
Really?
crazy, crazy stories. But
Boston must be the Irish mob.
no, this was actually a European mob. It was really interesting for us. The whole thing was interesting. We did the road trip from New Jersey to Boston. It took us like 6 hours each way. I drove back. Rob drove there, and the investors came in late. Those investors, and they were apparently doing a motorcycle trip around the country, and that Boston was on their stop. It was super weird. They were very interested, but then they rejected us in the last second. Many startup founders know that feeling.
Yep.
We knew that was not going to go anywhere. We should have known something when we found out they were based in Switzerland, but they were not from Switzerland. Not enough said. But anyway, then this final pitch with Sashi, it was one of our last pitches. It was really difficult at that time, to be honest with you. Like Rob and I looked at each other every day, and we're like, we're not getting an investor. What is going on? We know about these things, about our backgrounds and whatever. We're not the stereotype,
Yep.
And I remember we even pitched one investor, a very well-known investor, and we told them our story of how we met, and they're like, change your story to meeting in a college dorm. Like, do the
Yeah.
stereotypical and a Savile thing, and I'm like, no, like that's not honest. That's
Yeah.
dishonest.
It's a fake review.
It's a fake, yeah, it's a fake story. And that's, by the way, that's a very prevalent thing in Silicon Valley, unfortunately.
Yep.
People
It
make
is.
stuff up, right, to be part of the stereotypical journey. I don't like that. Rob doesn't like that. We both don't like this. We like to be honest. We like to be truthful in the way we do it. And we were building a business based on truth, based on honesty. So it took us longer than going down this path of lying and fabricating stories. So that final pitch was really difficult because Rob was like, with his family, he's like, dude, you need to get a job. If you like, it's now the seventh month. You have to get a job. You have two kids, and I was like, should I go back to Kuwait? Maybe start building Fakespot from there. I have no salary right now, very low amount of money, and this final pitch, I did my best. I talked about Fakespot from my heart and my brain, and showed the whole program, showed where we can go with the future. And then 3 days later, SRI Capital calls me and they're like, hey, $1 million term sheet, find other co-investors if you want. And the other co-investors was Aziz,
Ah,
who introduced us. He was part of that pre-seed round. And Faith Capital from Kuwait, one of the first VCs from Kuwait,
nice.
the Talabat story that
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
sure you're with. They put
It
in the
just
remaining.
IPO'd for a huge amount, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, over
I,
10 billion.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's really, really
It's a big regional outcome.
Yeah, that's a amazing regional outcome. So having them as partners was really, really important for us. So I still maintained my link with Kuwait, even from the US,
Yep.
through
Yep.
our Kuwaiti investors, and that was our first round. And then I thought,
Nice.
okay, the hard part is done. And then I'm like, wait a second, I have to now interview people and start pitching them.
Right.
I
Exactly.
I was like, this is never ending pitching. Like you have to pitch everyone. Whoever you talk to, you're just pitching, pitching, pitching. And it made me kind of like a good salesperson, to be honest with you. Like that, I had to pitch employees and stuff like this. So that was the beginning part.
Yeah. So at that time, it seemed like your troubles were over, right? But then I know that down the path there were like huge challenges from giants that were really out to get you. So maybe you can tell me more about that story and share it.
Yeah. So in 2020, so we were actually building, believe it or not, one of our other business models was a B2B product. It was a SaaS based product for massive brands to put in their products, put in their competitor products, and get like sentiment analysis, fake review analysis, and everything else with the products. We even could detect counterfeit sellers selling their own product because third party is a big thing in e-commerce. For businesses to scale, they have to introduce other sellers into the business. And this product, it was called a Sentinel. We had our first pilot customer. It was a couple hundred k ARR, and this was just one customer. They were a Fortune 10 company.
Nice.
They were big spot users. They emailed us. They're like, "Hey, do you guys have a B2B solution to this problem we're doing?" It turns out they had an army of humans analyzing reviews manually.
Yeah.
And so we went to their headquarters in Midtown, and we demoed the product. We built it in maybe 3 days. We repurposed the consumer engine and put it
You have this product coming right up.
it was a crazy we had to kind of do magic with a couple things to make it look really really fast and whatever, but it worked. And their C-suite were in the pitch
Mm,
in the conference room, and they're like, "Let's do a contract. Let's do it." We called our investors. We were like, "Hey, we figured out a different business model now. We can we
yeah.
can do B2B SaaS." Honestly, but I will be honest with you, that type of business at that time did not really interest me personally. But I knew we could build a sustainable business model around it. I was more on the B2C side. I loved helping millions of shoppers. That was my
Passion.
my interest. Yeah, and then we were started building it. This is end of 2019. We started pitching, and we are about to close our another round right after the pre-seed round. I would call that round seed round, and we closed it based on that B2B SaaS model. We closed it in January 2020, and then the pandemic happens. And when that happened, all our customers that were using the B2B product said, "Hey guys, we're freezing our SaaS budgets. We can't we can't renew."
Yikes.
So, I looked at the team, I looked at Rob, and we're like, "What do we do now?" So then I started looking at Honey, and I started looking at the other extensions, and I'm like, "Our extension's still growing without us doing anything with it. We were so focused on this B2B. Let's go all in into that. Let's use the stuff we built for the B2B, like the counterfeit detection, which now is called Fakespot Guard, and put it for consumers. Let's see if consumers like it." Now, this is really interesting. Talking about social trends and trends in the industry. At that time in the pandemic, I don't know if you know this, Ali, but in America, there was a lot of counterfeit sanitizers, fake plastic gloves. Anything associated with the pandemic was being faked, and fake spots started being used more and more by people. And we added all these new features into the Chrome extension, and it went ballistic. The growth went ballistic, and Honey just got acquired by PayPal for 4 billion. So that now everyone's like, wait a second, browser
Browser
extensions are
extensions. Yeah.
yeah, they're crazy because browser extensions were very hard to pitch in the past. In 2017, 2018, for some reason, investors just were not interested in it. They thought it was like a little plug-in in a browser. There's too many dependencies. It's not interesting. But after the Honey acquisition, people started realizing there could be a lot of money made in this industry. So we went all into that, and we went that summer 2020. We were working remotely because that tri-state area was all closed down, locked down,
Yep.
and we achieved our biggest growth ever. Like it was just skyrocketing, and we got introduced to Bullpen Capital, a very well-known investor in Silicon Valley, and they led our Series A round. And so this was tail end of 2020. We closed a Series A, and we're now off to the races. We had the kind of stereotypical playbook. for Silicon Valley startups in New Jersey, New York City, which was kind of interesting. In 2021, we released a mobile app that did what the extension did. It would show you grades and everything. And then one big company, a $1 trillion company, said, "Hey, stop that. We don't like what you're doing." And that, I don't need to mention words here and the names, but if you look this up, you'll see who it was. Um, it was the first time that a large company like that went after a smaller startup, like in a takedown kind of way.
Yep.
They complained to Apple. We were at this point we were getting a lot of like growth through that app without any marketing. Just started installing it and using it over the e-commerce platforms app, which was a terrible signal. So they complained to this platform to Apple, and Apple basically sided with them, took down our iOS app at that time, and this was really interesting. I did not sleep for a couple days at this time
Mm.
because everyone was panicking. Our investors, my team, and I had to maintain like a semblance of calm and peace, and have this strong face. At the same time, I was like, wow, this is really hard. So I wrote a public letter to that what you mentioned at
Yeah,
the
I read
beginning of.
it.
Yeah. Yes. And
Are you like for legal reasons you don't want to mention it, or
well,
I mean it's public. I mean, dear Jeff
well,
and
yeah,
all that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, so, yeah, I mean, I do have to also now give credit to Amazon. I think they build a platform. Yes, there are problems, but nothing is perfect. But they built one of the best platforms in the world for e-commerce, and they were just protecting their interest. Why allow a startup mentioning that there's a fake review problem if you can, do something about it? So I understand where they're coming from, and it took me some time of processing to understand their perspective as well and our perspective. And the best outcome would have been for us to kind of work together with synergistic each other. And I think we evolved that relationship over the years, where we started doing it. That period of time was difficult. Yes, 100%. All my investors were looking at me for answers. They were like, "This is a big hammer that you just got hit with," and I'm like, "I know, but we got hit with other hammers too in the past. We could get through this." The letter itself was just a stance that that was like, "Hey, we're here. We're protecting consumers. We're interested in the same things. Let's work together. Let's work with the shoppers. Let's work with the platforms. Let's work with the brands." And that's kind of like the narrative we wanted to take. We That app didn't come back on the App Store. We built a different app that took down certain elements that was a little bit more lightweight, and that was
Mm.
then released, and nothing happened. It
Accepted.
was it was accepted. It was okay. We actually worked with Apple diligently, and they were really cool. We talked with the very high up the chain there, and I think they didn't want to have a battle with someone that was protecting consumers. Like there's no point in doing that. At that time, they also had they still have it with Epic Games, and
Yep.
I had a couple emails at this time with a couple well-known billionaires at this time, and I started seeing behind the scenes. Wow, some people don't like Apple, some people don't like Amazon, some people like them, and everyone is now trying to like build, like this chess game, and I'm part of
Yep.
it, and I don't want to
You're
be part
you're a pawn in the game.
of the pawn in the game. And I was like, let's get out of this and let's go back to building what we are building and caring about what we care about, and that's where we doubled down on everything that we were doing. We built that new mobile app. We released it on Android. It was a browser, which turns into a longer story how a browser company bought us later on. And the browser extension. But the new mobile apps were okay.
Right. So it was kind of an app that had a browser in it, and that browser browsed the e-commerce sites, right?
Yep, it was a
You
web
added
view.
the right.
Yeah, it was a web view, like a window into a
Interesting.
browser. And we would put the fake spot grade at the bottom of the browser. We would build our own like toolbar within the browser itself, and it was basically our own browser. Other companies started cloning our app, believe it or not. A multi-billion-dollar
Hmm.
company. Um, uh, these privacy-oriented companies started looking at it, and that's when I think Mozilla started looking at us. They were also like, "Oh, interesting. They're building a browser that is protecting consumers, protecting people from reading fake reviews." We have a very similar mission: trust and transparency, building a better internet. We were building a better e-commerce internet. They were building a better like general internet, and that's when we started talking. Over the years, though, we did have many other suitors. I will tell you, uh, the biggest in the valley too, and I rejected them because we were just too early in the journey. When I was alone with FakeSpot, one of the big, like the Fang guys came and said, "Hey, would you come join us?" It was like a small like aqua hire or whatever. I still rejected it. I was not interested because we were it was just starting to build this. But it was also a good signal. You asked me earlier what was another signal for you to scale. That was a signal too, and that was a really good leverage in my pitches to
Yeah,
mention that.
to investors, of course.
Yes.
So, I mean, that was one of the challenges you passed by. I think maybe I wanted to ask you maybe before the other challenge that I wanted to raise about the technicality. So, I mean, you're using data. You're training your algorithm, your machine learning algorithm on data from all over the web, and you actually proactively detect counterfeits and things like that, and have them in your database so people can browse them and things like that. Uh, how how did you set this up, and were there data ownership issues that you had to face or handle?
So this is an evolving, I would say, legal matter in the United States. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. If you
Mm,
remember, there was a big case between LinkedIn, aka Microsoft, and HIQ Labs. I believe that was the counterparty. They scraped LinkedIn profiles and built a SaaS product around it, or something like this. I don't remember exactly the details.
hmm.
It was about it turns the it went all the way up to the highest court in California, and they basically said scraping publicly available information is okay. There's actually one of the biggest trillion-dollar companies does that as everyday business.
Yep.
Google.
Exactly.
They, they index their whole business is based around indexing publicly available information, not things behind a paywall or not things that are like you have to sign up and log in and whatever. Now that's a different story.
Yeah.
If you are so FakeSpot is built around the same model. Anything publicly facing, we can utilize and build this infrastructure where we can connect the dots that you wouldn't be able to as a human, honestly, because we're now connecting so many different dots between sellers and reviewers and review groups. Review groups are these places where sellers come to give out product for free, and they
Hmm.
get reviews in return. So we're building these massive networks of pattern correlation of clusters, and humans like it would take you maybe for one of these clusters it would take you a couple of days just to realize like there's a connection between these reviewers and these sellers and whatever. So
Right.
FakeSpot automates that. So it's kind of like the Google but for fake reviews and e-commerce.
Yeah. And what about were there like added challenges after Gen AI came on the scene where it's become so easy to create fake reviews that are very, very realistic and hard to distinguish
Yeah,
from
so
real
that's
humans?
if you're earlier on I mentioned we used attention mechanisms very earlier on when we were building our models. It was just me building the models. I actually that first round, first thing I did is I bought a lot of GPUs for our office. uh, I didn't want to spend any money on cloud compute. I knew how expensive, and sometimes they have massive margins. And immediately I bought a data rack, put it in, we started building models. Our first models actually we started generating fake reviews to see how good those models are, and we started training our counter models to detect those generated reviews.
Yep.
So it's built into the DNA of our engines to look at those reviews and try to determine. Now, can you ever detect it with 100% accuracy? No, nothing can do that. You can launder the text, so to speak, through different generators, then spin the words, and it will become really difficult. But it also reduces then the comprehension of those reviews. So there are other signals that then appear that another module in our fake spot engine will detect. So we look, we've evolved over the years from fake to reliability. How reliable is this review? Is it reliable for you to make a purchasing decision on this review? And that's kind of the stance we've taken given the generative craze and everything like this. But I'm very proud to say that our team has been actually we had a generative model before ChatGPT was launched. a couple generative models, the pros and cons V1 and stuff like this. You can see it on my blog. That was actually before ChatGPT, and that's a generative text model.
Yep. Cool. So I mean, so maybe we could go and talk about the Mozilla acquisition. How did that? I mean, you were obviously in conversations with them because you're aligned in many ways. But how did it come to a full acquisition and you moving there?
Uh, this is really interesting too, because just like everything else in the startup journey, you can't take a class on it. So you can ask for other people. Like if your investors went through that, you can ask them for advice. So I was fortunate enough to have investors that went through that. Sashi, I mentioned, he went through multiple times of this, and
Yep.
Paul at Bullpen also went through this. So I had good advice throughout the whole process. It's a little bit like, you have to negotiate. Obviously, you have to do a lot of that. Sometimes this stuff can take a long time, but once you are both at the same place, both, like, I mean, the buyer and the seller, you both want each other. You now have to proceed with the process, and the process is basically things that I learned myself, like the due diligence phase and the legal stuff and the financial stuff. So the whole process was really interesting. At that time, we were also about to raise another round, like essentially I would call it our A plus, right before a B round. And we had a lot of interest. A lot of the companies were seeing that we were using generative models. We had a lot of AI models that were built, and this craziness started happening again with the AI field, and we were totally on track. I was committed to that, and then Mozilla started talking to me. Now Mozilla is very interesting. I was using Firefox as a kid in Kuwait. Um, I hated Internet Explorer at that time. I actually got the Blaster worm, if you if you remember.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, the worm that would infect a lot of Windows computers through this service, SVC host on Windows computers, and it hacked our computer, and I couldn't use the computer, and I was like kind of irritated because I was coding a lot at the time. So Internet Explorer was another window wait for a lot of malware. So Firefox started appearing on the scene, and Mozilla is a company that has always been, I don't know why, but I've always had an emotion with them, like this emotion of warmth and a lot of love for their product. So when they came, it was a little bit different. It was a little bit different than other companies where they're just trying to be strategic acquisition. Now, I'm not saying that we are not a strategic acquisition to Mozilla. Mozilla has other things attached to it. It's a company that stands for a lot more than just making money.
Yeah.
So to me, that was really interesting because, to be honest with you, with Fakespot, I was not doing it just to make money. I was doing it to build a product that would be used by many people to bring some kind of benefit to their everyday life. And that's how I approached it. Money was in the list, but it was maybe in the top five, but at the bottom end. Um, so Mozilla, when they came by, it was interesting. I started seeing that we have very similar missions. I have this love for the company, for their reputation. They're very privacy oriented. They're very trust oriented. They built some of the best protocols, standards in the game. So to me, as a geek and with computers, it was like, this is awesome
Mhm.
that I'm talking to them. And I was, throughout the talks, I was like, is this gonna get serious? And it started getting serious, and then I'm like, okay, I accept it. I think this is time for Fakespot to be integrated into the one of the most used browsers in the world natively, and we are today on Firefox. And it just made a lot of senses across the board. At this point,
Yeah,
Fakespot was,
but you also, I mean, have other stakeholders. You have investors, employees, etc. So I mean, there are like
yeah,
financial aspects to the that you had to take into consideration as well.
of
Not
course.
not necessarily for your sake.
Yeah, of course. You have to take in everything, and you have to monitor and evaluate the whole picture. But for me, it looked like this just makes sense now. I talked to our investors, I talked to our team and stuff like this, and it just made sense at this time. I was mentioning, we were about 7 years old, and that's a bit of a long time for a company. And being acquired something like this, it with a browser company, it just made a lot of sense with all the technology we've built. It being natively integrated into a browser, it just made a lot of sense. And we were talking with other browser companies too in the past, but nothing really sparked the fire on my end and on the stakeholders' ends. But the pitching never ends too here. Like I had to pitch it to investors, I had to pitch it to people because we had this other road with raising a next round, maybe scaling it more. My dream was to go to an IPO, believe it or not, and expand FakeSpot to other things than just e-commerce, everything, allowing you to get the best information, whether it's news, whether it's comments, whether it's anything. But obviously, you would need to raise a good amount of capital to
Yep,
go
yep.
after the markets. Yeah.
Especially with GPUs costing what they do these days.
Yes.
Y- Yeah. So tell me a bit about Mozilla. I mean, you have the Mozilla Foundation. It's non-profit. It's a non-profit. So how does it make money? I mean, where does this become sustainable?
Well, I mean, Mozilla is a sustainable company. The nonprofit owns the corporation, which is where that acquired FakeSpot. It's a different structure than you see in Silicon Valley companies, and I think this structure allows us to be building products that are for the societal good and for building a better internet. Because we don't have this for-profit mantra affecting our decisions and affecting everything we do. So I think that's really good. I think that's really interesting, and it's really, really different. I mean, you can count on your hand how many companies are like that. The primary revenue source for us is through our search deals that we have in the browser. So if you
Mm,
search something on the new tab or whatever, that's where we get basically some kind of share of the money that is generated through advertising. And that's how Mozilla has built a revenue stream over the years. This is pre-acquisition
yeah,
of our acquisition, and that's how basically they've done it. We were the second acquisition by Mozilla, so Mozilla is also not a company that goes around and acquires other
yeah,
companies. They do it very diligently, and they do it when there's a meaning behind it. So the first acquisition was Pocket. They also had a Chrome extension and browser extension, and they were basically the bookmarking
yeah,
platform of
yeah,
the internet. Yeah,
yeah.
so you may be
I think it's integrated into the browser as well.
correct. Yes, it's
Right. Yeah.
integrated into Firefox. It's a little shield icon that you see at the top.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go down a different path, and I have no idea where it's gonna take us, or if it's gonna take us anywhere. But I'm gonna go down it anyway. But on the LinkedIn post for your episode, Brandon S, who I think worked for Mozilla at some point, said I have to ask you about catching big fish off the coast of Florida. So what is that about?
So I moved to Florida. I was in, the New Jersey, New York City area, and it's been about a year here now for me.
Ah,
And
so you moved to warmer climates.
warmer climates, other benefits here too. Benefits that we take for granted in the Middle East region. So it's I picked up fishing here, and I've not gone offshore yet, like you mentioned, off the coast. More doing more inshore stuff, and yeah, there's a lot of interesting fish here. I mean, there's I think in our lagoon here, which is an estuary, it connects to the ocean and then connects to a river. We have
Hmm.
about 650 species of
Wow.
fish here. This is like the fish capital of the world. A lot of people come from all over the world, from Japan, from other states, just to fish here. And before moving here, I didn't even know about that. I didn't really care, honestly. I was not
Mm,
fishing at all. I did a little bit in New Jersey, but New Jersey, the weather gets really cold sometimes, and I was like, I'm gonna do something else. But here it's warm, and you can go out. And now with my son, we've been doing a lot of fishing together. It's a good bonding experience. He
nice.
actually really he's 6 now. He appreciates the outdoors, and I'm not giving him a phone or a tablet or anything like this. I'm not going to be parenting him that way. I want him to be in the physical world as much as possible before the digital world takes over his life, like it did for me.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, so that's fishing for you, and maybe I'll go from fishing before I go to. Actually, no, I'll stick to the article. You wrote an article a couple of months ago about the generalist paradigm, and you ended it by saying that anti-generalist looks to gain the most. So, could you please explain what you mean by the generalist paradigm and why you ended it with this statement?
Okay. I mean, it's a really interesting topic. It's another, I would say, one of those social trends that you're trying to gauge when you're looking at what's happening with technology, what's happening on the hardware and software layers. You've heard from people in the field, and I think the most known quote was from Altman. There will be $1 trillion company managed by a couple people because AI is going to automate a lot of the stuff. So that's kind of where the generalist paradigm comes into play. You're becoming a generalist with these different technologies and stuff like that. However, I think there's an asymmetric opportunity for the other side of the coin. Yes, it's going to be 80% generalist, but the 20% is where the biggest growth is going to appear, just like everything else we've seen in the industry here. It's very similar to the Pareto principle, obviously. That's why I'm mentioning the 80/20 rule here. That 20% right now is not 20%. It's, I would say, you have to have specialized people like doing DevOps, front end, back end. But if you're looking at the trend behind Cursor and these different models that specialize in coding, a lot of the very menial tasks are getting automated. And that's really interesting. I mean, Fortran and COBOL, the uh, languages that no one supports today, but the banks, the biggest institutions in the world, still use them. I
Hmm.
mean, generative models can learn that and start implementing, updates into those code bases. So, being a generalist is going to become the most apparent thing, and you're seeing it already. All these startups that are getting funding, it's all about the generalist. I think there will become an opportunity where the anti-generalist will also have an asymmetric kind of chance for growth. So I think for you as an investor, for me as well, um, I would say I also invest, but from more from the looking at ideas and things like this. I think that's where there's going to be a lot of growth, and there are some things that generalism will just not apply. Generalism, the word itself is, I mean, it means like you're basically a master of none, right? You are an expert in so many different things, but you're not a master of anything. So I think that's where it's going to be really interesting. The other reason why I mentioned that article is because we're working with a very well-known professor from NYU, Professor Tujilin, and he's one of the pioneers in neural networks. He built first the recommendation systems. He's a Jan LeCun's peer, and he works closely with the Fakespot team. And one of the research we're doing is how can we build specialized anti-generalist models. So I'm talking now about models, not humans,
Hmm.
that specialize in specific domains and actually build on top of that. And you're seeing that with medical. You're seeing that with, but again, they're doing the generalist kind of approach, which is, I think, dangerous because of hallucinations and all these other aspects.
Mm.
So this is kind of my take on the trend that's going to happen on the scene. And we're already seeing, if you go on X, everyone is like generalist. No one is really
Yeah.
specialist. And I think the specialist will become the rare breed that will become the asymmetric opportunity.
Yeah. Especially if it's tapping a huge market, like where there are already like human beings doing the specialist work, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
if we're going to colonize Mars and go into space, having specialists to do certain attributes of that is going to be really important and critical.
yeah, makes sense. So you're a coder, you're an entrepreneur, but you're also a musician. So you play guitar, you do vocals. If you like, if you went back in time and you had to choose, would you prefer that you had been like more successful as a vocalist, for example, than you would have as an entrepreneur? And how do you think like music plays, supports what you're already doing?
Uh, I started making music when I started coding, which is it's a very interesting tangent that you're taking me on. But if you look at music and creating music and composing music, which is what I was very interested in, there are a lot of similarities between music making and programming. There are patterns, Fibonacci sequences, the golden ratio, and stuff like this. They appear all over the place mathematically. And then if you're coding specific algorithms, you can make algorithms that make music. And there's a lot of similarities between those two worlds. Also, logic, mathematical intertwined with logic. It's really interesting. Now, your question about do I not regret going into a musical career? Honestly, I had a junction point in New Jersey where I was making this progressive house music, very energetic music. I was producing it, and this one song was going to be released by Spinnin Records in Netherlands, one of the biggest electronic labels in the world. They had Martin Garrix and all these different guys, and I was 21 at that time, and I remember they sent me a contract, and I started talking with my parents in Kuwait, and I'm like, hey, I may quit college and go to Netherlands now. And this is 1 week before finals, like final examinations.
Great timing.
Great timing. And I told my parents, and they were like, "Yo, like, don't be crazy. Like, go back to your studies and do all this stuff, and maybe do more with coding instead of music." At this point, I was like, I'm very passionate about music as well, but I could do it in parallel with coding. When I was coding in Kuwait as a kid and as a teenager, I never had in my head that it would be my professional life. I was just doing it because I loved it. So I think the passionate side of me, the Arabian passion side, you know what I'm talking about, was very latched onto that. And I allowed it to kind of blossom. And I think today in our age, we don't allow those things to blossom. We're very, like, our attention is all over the place. And I think the best startup founders are very able to focus on one thing and do it very well and let it blossom and there's the fruit of your labor essentially appear. So with music, I still play music. It's much less than I used to do. I'm much less obsessed. I would say I'm very obsessive over things I love. But I had that junction point, and I chose computers.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you did. I think music does support the type of thinking that that coders need, and it enhances. And a lot of Nobel Prize winners in science, by the way, played musical instruments. There's a very strong correlation there, by the way. And
Yeah,
there's creativity in coding, so just like music. So there is a lot of intersection, I think. And it's
100%.
cool that
You
you still play.
Yeah, I still play. I still love it. My son is actually now very into music. He's playing a lot. He loves building too. So to me as as a father, I'm seeing this. Like your questions that you're asking me, I'm now questioning him. Um,
Mm.
what are you gonna like doing? Are you gonna like doing this? Are you gonna like building? Are you logical? Are you more creative? So it's really interesting to see that on a child level.
Yeah, and it's really rare to see kids these days getting the chance to go deep. You called it going like being very like going being obsessed about something or going very deep into something. Usually, everything is generalist. Everything is
Yes,
I'll see this quickly and that and check out this thing over there and and this is a trend these days and this hashtag is trending. But it's from the parts where we go deep that we really find excellence or satisfaction in life. This
I
is turning very
absolutely.
philosophical, kind of like, and
I
I know you
absolutely.
like a bit of Marcus Aurelius and and Stoic philosophy as well. But
Yes.
Aziz has told me some of your secrets. So going back, you also wrote about Web3 and machine generated content, blockchain, what all that entails. Can you tell me about why you think the huge amount of machine generated content and how you think it might play out? And because this is an area I'm also very interested in these days.
Well, so machine generated content was my bet. I tried to bet what the term would be before generative AI started appearing. So I called it myself machine generated content. To me, it made sense. That term made sense. But I guess it's not. It's too technical and it's not trendy in the.
It's too long.
Um, it's too long
Gen
and it's
AI
too.
is much less.
Yeah, Gen AI sounds, I guess, better. And there's obviously AI in the word. I
Yeah,
missed that.
yeah, which is
I
even
missed that
better.
up. So, but it's to me, it's still all machine generated content. I mean, a machine is generating the content for you.
Yep.
I think the biggest problem, and this is something we're working on, and very fortunate to work on inside Mozilla, because this is very aligned with what Mozilla does. Is we're looking at deep fakes, and we're also looking at security problems within generative AI models. So, along with what we're doing at Fakespot, we launched a Gen AI bug bounty program inside Mozilla. It's called Odin. It
Yep.
stands for Zero Day Investigative Network. And it's basically what I used to do as a teenager and with a group of people that did the same exact thing. We were all hackers, are now building this bug bounty program just for Gen AI. Why do we need this? Because there are a lot of new vulnerability classes that have not been even honed out. Like we don't know what they are. Are you
Exactly.
able to leak a model, and are you able to leak its knowledge base? Are you able to leak its training data? Are you able to leak its model weights? If you are, you've now tapped into like billions of dollars worth of resources, and now you can extract it. So those types of vulnerabilities are really novel and very, very new, and we want to pioneer our way through this. And folks that are listening, they can check this out at 0din.ai. That's our platform. And Marco, Pedram, Ron, and our remaining team are actually building this out along with the Fakespot team. And we're trying to look at the most used models in the world and what are the problems with them. So this is our bet on making AI more secure with Mozilla. And then Fakespot is expanding its efforts into detecting deepfake content. You mentioned what will be the biggest things with machine generated content. Well, I think there will come a point, a convergence event, where we won't know what is coming out of a human or out of an AI, and it's already happening right now.
Yep.
The innocuous way of it was in the past was we had a fake LinkedIn person reach out to us with a fake image that was AI generated and said, "Hey, I have this new product, SaaS product to sell you. Come sign up."
Yep.
That was the innocent way of doing it. Now it's actually more malicious. It's going to be very deleterious. It can happen on many different angles, and we have to be really careful. There's actually, everything is now based on voice authentication when you go to a bank or whatever, but you can clone someone's voice with a Gen AI model. What do you do in that case? How do you detect that that's a Gen AI model talking instead of a human? And how do you now validate the biometrics? So these types of problems are really difficult to solve. You see Google release the watermark, um, signatures
Hmm.
within out from Gemini and stuff like this, but
Yep.
marks are only going to take us so far. There will always be artifacts related in the, like, for example, audio file. So we're building a deepfake detection platform as well for Fakespot right now, and that's I would say a very critical bet for our futures for society because we will not know what we can trust anymore. And it's kind of like what Fakespot does, what it used to do with the e-commerce, now expanded and bubbled up.
No, I think it's really cool and it's cutting edge, and it's really important for the future of humanity. I would say. I mean, and now I understand. You had like at the end of your post about the future of AI, you said, what did you say? If you're interested in working on revolutionary AI in the future, reach out. So I guess that's what you guys are working on right now. If somebody does reach out, right?
Exactly. That's we're working on one aspect of it. Obviously, there are many different aspects, but you see, this is the anti-generalist approach. We're looking at a different segment in the market and trying to find the asymmetric opportunity to help people, to help folks across and make the internet better. And you can do that through technology.
So one of the problems with AI is like you need huge resources for training and inference and all that. Do you think there's a way any part of this can be open sourced or decentralized, or is that not realistic in any way?
With the current way everything stands, with hardware requirements and everything like that, and nuclear power reactors being necessary, I mean, you won't see people, your neighbor, having a nuclear core reactor and training a model. That's with the current energy requirements, it's impossible. And if you look at, like, for example, XAI, the whole pitch is to buy 100,000 GPUs. I mean, that's the whole pitch to the investors. Obviously, they believe in Musk and everything he's done,
Hmm.
but the whole pitch is just to get this whole plethora of GPU fleet and start training models. Now, the problem I'm seeing with this, because I've been building models for a long time, since 2015, transformers are not efficient. They're not effective, and we require a new infrastructure that is more scalable and more efficient and more intelligent, honestly. At the end of the day, you won't hear this from the founders pitching their companies, but these models are just statistical matching machines. They attach a number to a word, and then to a sentence, and then to a paragraph, and then to a document that is closely correlated in a very, like a Euclidean kind of space. And that's how it works. It works on higher dimensions where it finds correlations where we're like, whoa, like that looks awesome. It just generated this interesting prank. Yes, but it's a statistical matching machine. It's not true intelligence. It can mimic intelligence. And by the way, going back to the generalist, this is kind of what I was hinting at here, that these are not real intelligence machines. They will mimic a lot of stuff. And if you look at Peter Thiel, he had a professor in college named Rene Girard, and you can check out his
Oh yeah,
work.
yeah,
He
mimetic. Okay.
yes, he did a lot of work mimetic theory. To me, what's most interesting, these LLMs and these large models are mimetic uh,
Mm.
capital. That's all they are. It may look novel, but if you examine closely, I mean, if you look at a picture with hands and whatever, it's not original. You know there's something off, and they're just basing it off an understanding. Now, there will come a point, I think, but it requires quantum computers. We're seeing a lot of new research happening in quantum computers. That will also require new hardware, by the way. I think the current generation of hardware you see with GPUs, they're going to be great for the next 2 years. But then the next one is going to be really interesting. There's a lot of research with graphite, for example, and having quantum properties attached to graphite. So myself, I've been looking at companies that are working on this. How are they evolving these chips and stuff like this? We will require new paradigms that are utilizing quantum properties, um, and to be able to train things at a much more efficient and effective scale. I've also, if you look at the brain, the brain is in a superposition.
Mm.
And that's actually a concept from quantum physics, quantum mechanics, like Schrodinger's cat. You don't know what's going on into the cat until you observe it.
Hmm.
And that's the whole premise to that experiment. And I think for true intelligence, you need to emulate that, or you need to make it happen, not emulate it. If you emulate it, it's going to be still a fake intelligence.
Mm. Yeah, make it happen. And but then when you make it happen, you don't know what comes out of the box, right? You're taking a
Well,
big risk.
that's intelligence, isn't it? Instead
Yeah.
of right now with large language models, I can change a parameter, like let's say temperature. This is the most used parameter, and you can make it hallucinate to kingdom come. Like it will hallucinate so bad, like you will be like, what is this talking about? It will put in symbols and stuff like that. But what you just mentioned is the key thing. That's true intelligence.
Mm. Scary times, huh?
It is scary times, but I think I do admire what Saudi Arabia is trying to do with technology, trying to be at the forefront of this. And I think in the region, in the Middle East, we need to have a bigger awakening. Honestly,
Yep.
oil and gas is only going to take us so far, and I think the leadership understands that. But we need to build the next chapter of our societies. Now, whether that requires a cultural change or whatever, it's going to be really interesting.
So I was gonna allude to that later, but since you mentioned it, I mean, what do you think we needs to change in the regional ecosystem, especially when it comes to technology and thinking about it?
We need to get out of our comfort zones. if
Mm.
you if you look at our societies, they're built on comfort zones, and they're kind of built on Dutch disease. if you know Dutch disease, it's a phenomenon uh, from the Netherlands where Netherlands became a really rich country and started being in their comfort zone and stopped innovating as a society and stopped all this stuff.
Right.
Um, we have that. I mean, when I look at our region from here, from the U.S., I see it, and I also, by the way, I see it even in states like Florida. Like you see people here coming from retirement, or like they were very successful, and now the hunger has is done. I see it around me, and I do miss, by the way, that part of the tri-state area. I miss the hustle and
Yeah.
bustle
Yeah.
and the. So you have to kind of like be mentally meditating on that and kind of moving in that direction. But that's what I mean. Like that region, we need that, and we need more people like you and other folks doing very important work to advance our societies and our communities. I think doing ambitious bets like Neom and uh, like cities like that is very interesting because you're now building an environment based off greater thinking, innovative thinking. Maybe I think the leadership in, for example, in Saudi, they realize like we need a new environment. Maybe maybe these established cities they're not working conducively well. They're not conducing like that kind of innovative thinking and stuff like this. That doesn't mean that innovative thinking is not coming from there. But you just mentioned Talabat. I mean, Talabat is
Yeah.
also it's kind of based on models from different markets, and I'm seeing in the region, and I'm not trying to be offensive, but most of the most successful companies in the region in the Middle East, the MENA region, are kind of clones of models that you see in other
Yeah.
markets. I'm not seeing something truly new, innovative, like let's say an open AI.
Hmm. Yeah. I think what you were talking about is two things, like a cultural shift and a new way of a new hunger. And the second is really ambition, that you have to be very, like, much more ambitious than we have been. Uh, I'm not,
Yes.
I am, I guess, by nature optimistic, but, like in China, that's how they started. They started with clones. And then the clones became better than the originals, so to speak, eventually, and they were able to get, I mean, the TikTok algorithm is incredible when you think about it, superior to the U.S. Companies that maybe were earlier to this type of algorithm, as an example. But there are many other examples. So I mean, it's not by necessity that if you start with clones, you stay at clones, but it does need a new shift in ambition in the region, definitely.
China is very competitive.
Yeah.
They want to
Oh yeah.
compete. They want
It's
to compete with
incredibly.
America. They want to win.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, you
do you
feel it
see that?
walking the street there.
Yeah, you feel it in their cities, you feel it in their culture, you feel it in their academic, right? Like, I mean, very, very clear what's happening there. By the way, TikTok is also based on an American company, though, right? Obviously,
Yeah,
musically.
musically. Yeah, yeah.
And they bought an American company and then put, the innovations
Well,
that you're seeing.
musically was there was like musically, and then there was the God, I forgot the name now of the other ByteDance company that was in China, that was the news algorithm aggregator. And then they took the algorithm from the aggregator and the video generation stuff from musically, and they put that
Yeah,
together, and it was an explosive mixture that was much stronger than the beginning. Absolutely.
it's really interesting.
uh,
Yeah, musically was not obviously not viral in
yeah,
that
exactly.
sense. Trying to infect your brain and you're just sitting on the app like a robot and using it for like a couple
Yeah,
hours past like what happened to time. That algorithm is
exactly.
definitely very, very strong, and they're using generative AI technologies now to even enhance that further.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone is, I guess, not just them, so as not to, it's not about China scare so much as, that there's a lot of stuff happening in the world these days. So yeah, I mean, and I think they're also like, they're building off of a history of being an empire. I mean, China was always a huge, usually the number one GDP country in the world, by the way. I mean, for most of history, with the exception of the 18th and 19th and 20th century. So maybe we should also kind of go back to our history of greatness, so to speak, and change the level of our ambition.
Yes, but I think, I mean, if you look at our history, Ottoman Empire was very ambitious.
Hmm.
If you look at, but Ottoman Empire then started getting very comfortable, and that's when
Exactly.
the other powers started finding the cracks and breaking it. So I don't know if that is the answer, but I fear that if the oil price drops, that's when there will be an awakening, and you're like, okay, panic.
Yeah.
We need to
A
start
forced
changing
awakening.
ways. Forced awakening. And it's not just the Gulf countries. The oil price would affect all the other countries around the Gulf countries, because the Gulf countries
Oh yeah.
contribute to the economies of all these different countries, and it's going to spread like a virus when that happens. So, but it's not happening right now. But I think a lot of the bets that are happening in the region are to alleviate those problems.
Hopefully. All right. So, I mean, going back to you as a like, I guess you still code, right? Um,
Yes.
how has coding changed for you? What are the best practices for you? I mean, the last couple of years have been incredible when it comes to tools and stuff like that. What are your best practices now? How do you usually approach coding versus how you used to? What are the main tools for you?
Yeah.
Very
So
hands-on question.
I'm not coding as much as I was back then when I was wearing many hats. Uh, I'm more now, I would say, managing folks and managing, the operations and the business and the product and stuff like this. So I personally am not a fan of that. That's something that I have to get better at myself. But there's a big human element attached to it, and finding the most effective approaches for developing a product and so on. Obviously, it all starts with building a great team in that case. But in
Mm,
regards to coding, I still code uh, whenever I have free time outside of work, and I'm trying to see what these generative models can apply into it. Now I'm seeing every time there's a new update with a lot of these models, they break everything. The model becomes stupider or better or whatever. The statistical correlations are becoming worse. That's how I'm going to say it. It's not intelligence.
mm,
Um, and you have to kind of work around that. And you can make yourself really effective, but now you're moving towards that generalist approach. Um, I personally dislike JavaScript. I also dislike TypeScript. Um, so the front end side was never I just never liked it.
forte.
And
Yeah.
Ne- yeah, it just never interested me. I never liked it. Not to say that you can't build great projects with it. It just I never really appreciated it. And believe it or not, JavaScript has its roots to Mozilla and Netscape.
Hmm.
So I can use it for that purpose. So I use it for things that are like kind of like menial and like okay, you just have to spend some time writing code, and it's like following a recipe. If you have that type of problem in front of you, these technologies will work really well for you. But if you have a very novel problem, the anti-generalist problem, these models will not work well. They will work well maybe for some parts or components, but they won't work for the whole picture.
Right. So for kind of the repetitive, pretty standard kind of straightforward parts, which
Yep.
makes sense.
But the problem is Ali, if you're doing that and everyone else is doing that, I mean, you're just competing with everyone else. And
Exactly.
what
Yeah.
are you?
Yeah.
Uh, I heard so. One of my close friends who's intertwined with the AI, one of the startups, one of the biggest startups in NYC, they mentioned to me they raised a huge round. They used generative AI to code a lot of the code base, but there was one bug that led to 100 other bugs, and they didn't understand what the model produced for them now to bug the problems. So they're now rewriting the whole code manually. So all the time savings that model did for this big project is now eliminated. So because of these types of bugs that it can produce, and the whole foundation is cracked. If you build a building where the cement is inferior to the stuff on top of it, you have to go back to the foundation and rebuild it. So that's the hardest thing. But the smartest people using these technologies that understand these problems can augment and enhance their processes for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You have to handle with care. I mean, if you're not an expert, don't depend, at least for like, don't build your foundations on it. Definitely. That's good
Yep.
advice. So, I mean, you mentioned that you do some investing, etc. I mean, what makes an investment stand out for you?
The team. I'm kind of biased in the fact that I look for people that kind of have some elements of attributes that I've seen in myself. I look for people that are very technical, know their stuff. I'm very good at smelling BS a mile away, and a lot of founders I talk to are actually BSing. This is the biggest problem I'm seeing because startups are so like sexy and like you can grow a lot in it and you can raise money and you can appear on the media. If you're that type of founder, I'm not going to invest. I'm investing in the people that are more that can debug the code hardcore level, but also have general curiosity to build their other skills. If you are able to do that,
Yep. Yep.
then you're going to figure it out one way or another. And by the way, the the lead investors in Fakespot, I asked them, "Why'd you invest in us?" After the whole thing, the
Hmm.
whole story, and they basically answered it that way, which I was like, "Huh, interesting." Yeah.
I have to get to know because that's almost our thesis word for word. So that's also interesting. Anyway, don't want to talk about that. So, what are the characteristics of the best investors in your opinion?
They are part founder mentality and part investor mentality. Meaning they're not. I feel like the people that are 100% investors that don't code still a little bit, that don't like build products or something like this, even on the side, or experiment here and there. They're just basing now their investments on numbers and trajectories and market information. I don't think that's the best thing. You need to see the trend 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, and those are the best investors in my book. There are a couple investors that I really like in Silicon Valley and in New York City that have kind of followed that mantra whenever they're doing their things. Some investors do invest in scammy stuff, which I think you need to be avoiding, and they fell in the trap of hype. Which, or maybe they know what they're doing and they're like, okay, we can make a lot of money in 3 years and let's bounce. Um, is that ethical? I don't know. That's not my question. To me, I'm more interested in the people that are building substantial, meaningful things.
Cool. So you kind of also answered my question that I was going to ask you about what are the worst investors like?
Yeah.
So, okay, if you could like maybe zooming out to the region before we wrap up, wave a magic wand about the region, and I don't know how connected you are with Kuwait, how often you come, etc., and change something about the regional ecosystem that will drive the startup world, get it at a better place. What would you do?
Um, Kind of look at what the other markets that are innovating that are doing. I think there are a lot of case studies for us to learn from. So one example is Japan. Japan used to be the cloner of the world in the 70s and 80s, right? If you look at the cars and stuff like this, but then they started integrating their Bushido code, essentially, um, optimizing the heck out of the processes and making it super cheap and then competitive. I'm not seeing that competitive edge in our region.
Mm,
I'm just not seeing that attribute. Where can we be competitive? I know we have a lot of resources in the energy sense. So, and I remember in the crypto craze, there were miners starting to be built out in Kuwait. Aziz mentioned this to me, and a couple other people in Kuwait mentioned this to me. And I was like, that's really interesting. I mean, we have a lot of energy there. We have oil, we have gas. So let's compete with other people in the world. Nothing came out of it. No, I'm not sure why. We need to look at what we have. What is our competitive edge? It's capital, wealth in the Gulf countries, and then it's gas and oil and these
energy.
things and energy. So I mean, these are two big things. But I
Yeah.
feel like we've been underperforming in exploiting them and utilizing them. We're more interested in selling them to the world than using it for our own advantage. Now that's something I think we need to examine closely.
Yeah, you made me think about also this and extending what you just said. Competitive advantage is also almost cultural because your Japan example, you were talking about, they took something from their culture and they kind of use that as a competitive advantage in industry. So, I mean, in addition to having capital and energy, what is it about our culture that maybe, I mean, that's something that we need to think about, that is different or unique or distinctive, relatively speaking, and drill down on that. I think that would be also something that would be worth thinking about.
I think so. I agree with you. I mean, the reason why I didn't stay in Kuwait is because I love competition. I love being competitive. I love learning as much as possible. In Kuwait, I did not see that. It's great if you want to sit there, build a family, and take a summer vacation somewhere in Europe and stuff like this. I'm not interested in that. That doesn't interest me at all. I'm more interested in building things and stuff like that. The I still maintain touch with people from my school. We meant, before the podcast, we talked about which schools you were born in Kuwait, stuff like this. But I still maintain touch with a lot of the folks. It was a school where you're from KG to year 12.
Right.
That's the school. So the guys that were with me in class, same people. Some of them are building their own startups now,
Nice.
which is really, really cool to see. And I'm seeing ambition there. I'm seeing, unfortunately, there is a high unemployment rate. The
Yep.
youth of Kuwait and other countries, they don't have employment opportunities because the only sector is, guess what? It's
Oil and gas, government.
the government and oil and gas, but that can only take you so far. So you have a lot of people that are unemployed and they're just, they're waiting for their opportunity. We need to kind of look at that and make the avenue of building startups the promising avenue.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. So, with that, maybe we can go into the quickfire questions. And the first one is, what book do you like to recommend to others, or books?
Uh, so I would recommend, to me, the most transformative book was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I also have recently finished Tusculan Disputations by Cicero, who was a senator in Rome. Uh, he was really interesting
That
because
was an interesting character. Yeah.
very interesting character, and he also, like Rome was very anti-philosophy, and then he came like, "Yo, we can learn from Greek philosophy and apply it to our Roman daily lives instead of being just this gung ho warrior culture that Rome was." So
Mhm.
that those two books right now I would recommend. I always recommend ancient books because they've been filtered over thousands of years.
Yep.
They're still here for a reason. Why? Because they have some kind of value, and the human condition hasn't changed.
Yep. I agree, and that was something. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why I'm talking about myself so much today, but anyway, yeah. Like 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to read the classics, and I haven't regretted it. It's for this for the exact same reason you're saying. Reading Hugo when you're from France, or Goethe from Germany, or etc. There's a lot of wisdom there.
One hundred
It's
percent.
been filtered through the ages. That's why it's lasted so long.
100%.
All right. So, how do you unwind, and how do you stay energized?
I work out a lot. I run. Now I'm fishing also, and I love to fish with my son because he's learning a new skill. So that's how I would unwind. The music stuff still appears sometime, but not as much as I'd like.
Okay. Well, what question should I have asked you that I didn't?
Uh, how can we integrate philosophy more into startup culture?
I would never have thought of that question.
Oh, I mean, it kind of
So,
branches off what we just talked about.
how can we,
Uh,
and why
I
should
think
we?
I think uh, I think they so a big part of me being able to face all the challenges with startups that you face in that journey is through stoicism.
Yeah.
Like that kind of like the school I adhere to. And you mentioned Aziz mentioned this to you about me because whenever he faced challenges, I would recommend him some parts from that school of thought, and I do that with everyone in my life. I think we can always learn from that, and persevere through challenges that way.
Yeah. Cool. So with that, I like to close on a note of gratitude. So, what is a gift you have received from someone that has made a positive impact on your life?
I think the gift of family and love is one of the most important gifts that you can have in your life, and being able to spontaneously build things like when I mentioned Odin and the deepfake detection framework. That's something that I'm very thankful for at work and in the personal life. So um, that is something I'm very grateful for.
Great. Covers family and work. And when your wife listens to this podcast, make sure she goes to the very end because this is very important for her to hear as well. So, seriously speaking, though, thank you very much for your time, Saoud. Spent so much more than we had scheduled. So, I appreciate your generosity with your time and great speaking to you.
Likewise, I appreciate you having me. This is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Saoud.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Startups Arabia podcast. If there was something you really liked about what the guest said today, reach out to them on social media and tell them what you liked. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? You don't want to miss any of our great upcoming episodes. Also, please rate us and give us comments on our social media accounts so that we know how to improve. And also tell us what you like. We don't mind hearing that either. Until next time, this was your host, Ali Zwail.